Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Friday night, at least in the United States, edition of Asea 5. We have people coming in from all over the world, from Singapore and Australia and all through the United States. We even had some from Europe log on. So we welcome everybody. Tonight we have a little shorter version tonight because we're sharing the platform with the Australians who are going to be hosting on this site. So we're going to spend about 45 minutes and talk with our guests, the great Dr. Aaron Kaufman, who is sitting on the Asea Medical Professionals Board. So we are so fortunate to have him. He is a physician practicing in the great state of New Mexico, and he has a story, and I hope that he will share that with us. We also have Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas. She periodically gets beat up with hurricanes, but she is able to stay in the hunt with Asea, so we're glad to have her. Also, Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio. You can wave and let everybody know. Jim is a recovering stockbroker, and he is now full-time in Asea. My name is Dr. Lee Ostler. I am a dentist in the state of Washington. Both Maureen and I also are on the Asea Medical Professionals Board. So we're going to have a little conversation tonight that may be somewhat medically slanted, that provides some validation perhaps for redox signaling. And Maureen, I'm going to kick it to you and have you start asking some questions and create the context for this evening, if you would.
Hey, I'm happy to. And Dr. Kaufman is also a member of the Medical Professionals Board, so we're so happy to have him join us in that. And, just let me do a disclaimer. This is not a medical product, and we're not here to treat or cure, diagnose anybody. What we're teaching people about is redox signaling molecules, and these molecules are innate to the body. They're something that you have plenty of when you're young, but less of as you get older. And so what we're doing is we're replenishing them. This is a bioreplenishment. So it taps into the body's innate knowledge of how to heal itself. And when you give it what it needs, it's amazing what you'll see the body do. So what we do is we teach people about these molecules, we have them supplement with them, and we allow the body to heal itself. So you'll hear a little bit more about how these molecules work. And we come together every Friday night. We usually have a prominent medical guest on with us, like Dr. Kaufman here tonight, so that you can see the validation that we use these products not just for ourselves and the people we love, but we also teach people all around the world about them too, so that they can experience what we're experiencing with these products. Now, Dr. Kaufman, you have actually been in, I think, longer than any of the rest of us, and you are using this in your practice as well. You're still a practicing family practitioner, correct?
I am. I think you got in a little before me, Maureen. How long you been in?
I've been in almost 8 years. How about you?
Yeah, I got in March of 13, so you're a little ahead of me.
Ah, yeah, it took me. I actually joined at Thanksgiving of 2012, but I sat out. I was in back in training for age management medicine. And so I did not really want to be involved, as you've heard my story, and probably a lot of people on here. I got in because my husband had a health challenge and I wanted to see if the products would help him. Didn't have a whole lot of faith in them. They were made from salt water, and you'll hear a little bit about that. But I couldn't, even though I was in the training, I couldn't dismiss the fact that they were having an incredible effect on my husband's health and other people in our family and people that we had shared it with. So I think it was about end of April, beginning of May. If you remember, I don't know if you remember the old Bronze Base Camp, but I attended one of those with Terry Latham, and I was just blown away by the caliber of people, the science, the products. And I thought, you know what? People need to know about this. And as a physician, I'm sure you have felt the same way. I just felt I had a responsibility to educate people, because otherwise they may never hear about it. So I've been in a little bit longer than you, but took me a little bit of time to figure out what I had my hands on. So how about you? How were you introduced to it, and how did you validate it for yourself?
Well, I was, good evidence to support the notion of dripping on people and not giving up on people. When I was introduced to it approximately a year and a half before I enrolled by a doctor friend, Dr. Krista Edmonds, I was very, like so many of us, very, very network marketing averse. And I'd been burned in the 80s and 90s, and I was just sick of all the hype and misrepresentation and, you know, frankly, deception that I saw in other organizations. And, you know, it's still what gives network marketing a bad name in a lot of circles, you know, in a lot of areas of life. But so I was presented this, and I said, is it network marketing? Like so many products that were brought to me, because I have an integrative, or people now call it functional type practice. So they would bring me the latest, greatest juices and antioxidants and so forth. And I would say, is this network marketing? They said, yes. And I would go, absolutely not. And I was serious. And so when Dr. Edmonds introduced me to Asea, number one, I'd never heard of redox signaling. And so, you know, but when she said network marketing, I said, absolutely not. And again, I was serious. But she was smart. She kept giving me research articles, really well done research. And, you know, divine orchestration, or however you choose to look at it, because of Mark Tennell and having all these results cycling, you know, they did a lot of athletic research with David Neiman down in the Research Triangle at, you know, the Human Performance Lab at Appalachian State. And it was athletes going, you know, 12% further before they ran out of oxygen, all these metabolic shifts within 15 minutes of drinking it, mice going 29% further before they were exhausted and so forth. And at the time, I lived here in Cedar Crest, New Mexico, above Albuquerque. It's a bedroom community. And I'm right on the edge of the Cibola National Forest. And, you know, for at that time, 16 years, I've been running out my back door, running up through the forest up to 8,000 feet and back. And so there were at least 8 different places where I would max myself. You know, I would just be like, you know, I couldn't get enough breath. So I'd reached my VO2 max, and I really enjoyed that. But I'm reading these articles, and it's like really well done research. Everything is placebo controlled, randomized, double blind. But these athlete studies that showed the increased VO2 max were also crossover with washouts. So this is good research, and I'm reading it and I'm going, okay. And, you know, I first, not having no clue what redox signaling was, as most of us who did our medical training of any sort before, probably within the last 5-10 years, it just wasn't part of our training. It's a new, relatively new science starting in ballpark of 98. And so I went to PubMed, started reading research articles and, you know, and reading abstracts that had to do with, you know, redox cell signaling. And I started to get an understanding of how this integrated into, you know, healthy and pathophysiology, and to understand what they were. And then I read these athletic studies. And so I start drinking. It takes a year and a half of her giving me these articles. And right away, I started having results within a month. Drinking it just on the days I was running, I was powering up the mountain harder and further. I ran out of it. She sold me some more and asked me how I was drinking. And I told her, and she says, well, you know, you're supposed to drink it every day. And I go, okay. Started drinking it every day. Within 3 months, a month before I turned 60, I set new personal best times by 20% for these trails I've been running for 16 years. So that got my attention. And, you know, just incidentally, as far as PubMed is concerned, at that time, you probably looked too, Maureen. I think there was like about 6,000 articles that had something to do with redox signaling when you went to PubMed and put that in the search bar. And today, I haven't checked in a month or two. I think it's something like 34,000. So this is, you know, hotbed of research. Mm-hmm. But that was the That was the origins. And I subsequently learned that network marketing did not have to be reprehensible. It could be loving, caring people who clearly represent, in fact, underrepresent what they've got.
You know, I was doing some mental calculations because you've been in for about 7 years now, and you said you had turned 60. So if you don't mind my asking, are you 67?
I'm 67. So this was a month before I turned 60 that I set those times.
Wow. You don't, I figured you were my age. I'm 60. So yeah, you look awesome.
Well, whatever, Maureen.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that, you know, that is something that I think we see all the time, is that people look younger than their stated age when they're on these products, which is one of the side benefits of it. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So, you know, I went through something similar. Of course, I went to PubMed too. That's like Google for healthcare professionals. But one thing that happened for me that was so interesting is Terry Latham is the person who told me about it, and no medical background, doesn't even know what H2O stands for, you know, just total business. And he's talking to me about salt water, and I live on the Gulf Coast. So I'm like, I have plenty of salt water. I don't need to pay for any. But I was talking to my sister. I said, this guy Latham is telling me about this stuff called redox saline molecules. Never even heard of it. She's like, well, I've heard of it. I was like, how would you have heard of it? Now, she's not a scientist or a physician. She's a medical editor. And my medical school, the Medical University of South Carolina, had just gotten a $10.5 million NIH grant to study redox signaling in the body in a number of different systems. And I was like, wow, you know, so I kind of did a deep dive, because here my sister had heard about it and Terry Latham had heard about it. And I, as the physician, had never heard that verbiage before. So, you know, I kind of jumped in. So it's funny how we get started, and how sometimes it takes a few exposures. But so you were using it, you're an athlete, you were doing great. And then you brought it into your clinic, correct? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I did. I was just thinking of how professional I was at the beginning. So, you know, I again was network marketing averse, and I'm using this stuff, and I was upset. I went to Dr. Edmonds and I said, I'm going to have to drink this stuff the rest of my life, because I was sleeping and I didn't hurt, and, you know, mental clarity and energy, as well as running like an animal. And you know, so I was upset that this stuff worked, you know. And she looks at me, and at the time, you know, I don't remember how much I was using, and the costs were, you know, different. She says, well, if you tell 6 people about it, yours gets paid for. And I go, you know. But I turned around and I started, you know, listening to people, you know, my patients saying this, that, or the other. And, you know, I didn't fully, I don't think any of us did. And, you know, maybe even to this day, don't really understand all it does. Right. And my rudimentary understanding at that time was, okay, really old people, really sick people, and athletes. And that was about it. So people would come in and they say, I've got, you know, whatever going on. And I would go, well, And when I would finish talking to them, I would say, you know, I've been very professional. I would roll my eyes, I would sigh. I'd go, I've been drinking this stuff called Asea. And they would look up and to the right, and I go, no, it's not the acai berry. And they go, oh, okay. And I would say, and I've been running like an animal. It's these native molecules that we're making, not as much of as when we were young. And I've been running like an animal and setting new personal best times and sleeping like I hadn't slept in 20 years. And one thing after another stopped hurting. And I was shocked, because in my experience in the 80s and 90s, Maureen, when I started talking about whatever the products were, there's 3 different companies, people would be either physically or emotionally backing up. And I started telling these stories, and I came to realize this is a storytelling business. And people were leaning in, and their eyes were getting bigger, like a little kid when you're reading them stories at night, and they're just kind of like that. And so I kind of noticed that, and I swear to gosh, the first, I don't know, let's say 10 people, there was 2 or 3 of them who raised their hand and said, I want that. And I was going, the first one, I literally said, you do? I had never had that experience. So that was sort of the introduction. And then it was like, I would walk in the room and I would go, well, this person's not going to be interested. And the next thing I know, I've opened my mouth and people are just signing up like crazy. And, having a lot of great results.
Yeah, and that's back in the day where we only had the liquid. Now we have the gel, which is so much easier. I have other doctors on my team who use that, go in and say what hurts, and we're being a little non-compliant. Where do you have discomfort? And put it on. So yeah, it can be pretty powerful. Somebody in the questions, if you don't mind addressing it, is talking about high blood pressure. And sometimes on occasion we see that. Now we know that it's totally non-toxic. Can you speak to that and speak to why people might see sometimes a little change or a little negative effect?
As far as blood pressure?
Yeah, or, just with the rebalancing in general.
Well,
They say
your disclaimer early on is important, that this doesn't trigger, cure, or diagnose any illness. It just, turns on our cells. It youthens our cells to work more efficiently like when we were children. And, you think about who gets the vast, vast, vast majority of the degenerative diseases we experience. And we can name them off. It's everything that flesh is heir to. To a tiny percent, it's children. But the older we get, the more of these diseases of affluence we get. Because we have a deficiency of redox cell signaling molecules. Aging is a deficiency of these molecules. Now, to answer the question, commonly, Dr. Gary Samuelson is a medical atomic physicist who's responsible for stabilizing these molecules for us having these products. He figured out what they were and how to stabilize them because they were unstable. He did the impossible. But he told me a whole lot of things, including, there was several things he told me that it took me like over a year to really start to deeply comprehend what he was telling me. One of them was, he says that as we become deficient in these molecules, as we age, as we live in a toxic world, too much stress, whatever, our cells become senescent. And senescent means
asleep.
Senile. And so you think about grandpa or, whoever sitting there and they're becoming senile, Alzheimer's or whatever, dementia. And you say, Grandpa, this place is a mess. And he's just kind of staring off into space, or the place is on fire and there's just no response. The cell is like that. It doesn't respond to signaling from other cells. So it's Dr. Samuel's term is senescent. So as we replenish these molecules, it's like that cell wakes up, we youthen it. And so it starts to look around and go, oh my gosh, this place is a mess. And it starts to take the garbage out. So that's why we see sometimes people have a detoxification reaction. And included in that is people, without naming diseases, people who measure their numbers and their numbers tend to be too high and they take medication for it to bring those numbers down. Well, you start normalizing cellular function and communication within and between cells, and the cells start waking up and taking the garbage out. And so therefore we can see brief, it varies depending on what we're talking about, elevations in those numbers during that garbage removal period. And once they've reached a certain level of detox, then those numbers start to come down. And so I tell people that I'm working with, you need to be monitoring your numbers, and it may be that you will need to be getting off medication because your cells are becoming more, quote, normal, more efficient. So that's my response to that. Is that what you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's what I usually tell people too. It's kind of like if you've ever counseled someone to quit smoking, And, you know, they don't realize that the tobacco and the nicotine paralyze the cilia. And they're like, oh my gosh, my smoker's cough has gotten so much worse since I quit smoking. What they don't realize is things are waking up, the body's clearing itself out, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. Same with starting an exercise program. So, you know, we know that when things start working right, sometimes you go through a little bit of a rebalance, an adjustment as the body is correcting itself. So we can see.
Dr. Samuelson told a great story about that very thing, if you're interested.
Really? Yeah, go ahead.
He was, you know, dear friends with this Nobel laureate, I forget who it was, and cellular physics, I think also, it doesn't matter. But anyway, he, you know, had thoroughly talked to this guy about what redox cell signaling was and so forth. And at some point, this guy starts drinking it. And in a very short amount of time, he's coughing up all this crap. And he asked Gary, what's going on? And it turns out that like 20 years earlier, he had stopped smoking. And the cells were waking up, the cilia were waking up, and he was kicking out garbage that had been sitting there for over 20 years. Wow. And, you know, he didn't believe it until it happened to him.
Wow.
Now, a misconception real quick, Dr. Kaufman, because I think where people may, and I'm not the doctor, but when people see what it's made from, that may be where the confusion is. Well, I can't have any more salt in my diet. Can you address that real quick?
I already have, Jim. I've made videos on all this stuff.
Oh, just go ahead and tell us.
For this group.
I know you have, and we appreciate that, but
yeah, I actually,
a lot of new people.
It's good that you're asking me because, you know, I've made these videos in short notice. They were like 3 and 4 minutes each. And I think I made 10 or 12 of them when Asea Healthy Self first started, or maybe even before that. No, I think that's what it was. But anyway, I made a mistake. I was just rambling this stuff off, and I sent it off without listening. And I said that a 4-ounce daily serving of Asea has 23 grams of sodium in it. It's actually 120.
123, yeah.
So if anybody watches that, mea culpa, I apologize, I made a mistake. But
it's
the
milligrams.
And I
milligrams.
Milligrams.
Yeah.
Milligrams. I'm sorry, milligrams. Excuse me. I apologize. I made another mistake. Need more space.
Read the back of the bottle, you guys.
Yes. Yes. Milligrams. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So, you know, what I said in that video is if you're talking to your physician about this and they're saying it's too much sodium, you can tell them how much it is. And that's the analogy or the comparison we've made is to the equivalent of a medium-sized carrot or a slice of whole bread. But 100, you know, when people are up for either cardiac or renal issues are on a salt-restricted diet, it is commonly a 2-gram sodium diet, which is 2,000 milligrams. So you can see a standard serving of 4 ounces a day of Asea 123 milligrams is, you know, a tiny, tiny amount. So it's not really an issue for salt-restricted people.
Yeah. I tell them to go pull something out of their pantry, you know, ketchup or
that's a good idea.
Soup or something, yeah. And usually people are shocked how much sodium is in canned food. So
yeah, that's just a 4% of your daily allowed. So it's so minimal per day. And when we've heard this same scenario that Maureen was mentioning, you know, they're typically see that spike when it's through their healing episode. And we find if they make sure they have plenty of H2O, good, clean water, they're going to be able to push it out. Detox is good for you, just like exercise and sun gives detox. So if they drink enough regular water throughout the day, at minimum 64 ounces a day of water, they're going to be able to ward off that detox or slow up their, you know, usage of Asea until their body gets to homeostasis. So we think it's a good thing when they are going to get detox, but let's ward it off with more regular water, which they need. It's good for you anyways.
And a flush
per day. Yeah. Speaking of video, I love your one about the eyesight. I watched some of your short ones and I've sent those out. I love it. So people can find those. I believe it's at the Vimeo United page. I'm sure some may want to know where those are. But those are great little short ones to send out that you do such a good job with. So appreciate that.
Robinson, when they were first setting that up, said, would you make us, you know, some little short videos and with your comments? And I would just get my cell phone, walk outside or sit here at the computer and go, okay, here's my thoughts, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Something Alan Noble said last night on his show, you know, when the cells, you know, they take at least 90 days to see the cells regenerate. And he was commenting about skin, and you can just picture skin at 90 days not turning over, you know, before they get on redox. The skin is just a slow snail's crawl of turnover. And now Renew 28 gets it 28 days renewing. So that's the exciting thing about having Renew 28 is what it does for really any organ, but talking about skin for sure. So did you want to add anything? Yeah.
Lee, were you going to say something?
Good stuff.
I'd like to kick in with a few thoughts here. I know there's been several comments in the chat with regards to studies and science, and we do have some physicians on, and everybody's always asking, at least people who are medically trained, are wanting to see the science, the random controlled trials, and you know, and again, this is kind of a dangerous territory because we aren't. This is not a drug on purpose. And we're holding it up when we talk like that as though this is something that's going to be treating conditions. And that's not what this does, even though it might help. What this does is that it rebalances the cell so that any cell, I mean, when I talk about the cell, I'm speaking about all of the cells in the body. Once they have the signaling needed to activate genes that will help to produce the antioxidants glutathione and superoxide dismutase and many others. Once those genes activate, then the cell can act on its own. This is very different than, say, the allopathic pharmaceutical model, which is about acting on the cell. We're doing something to the cell, to receptor sites, and we're making a change, you know, through medications or even strong herbs. What we're doing is we're just realigning the cell so that it can do the work from inside. And of course, there's a lot of variability in that. But there's a reason why this is not a drug and why we don't put this out for random controlled trials. And that can really trip up a lot of people who think that because we're talking medical stuff or dental stuff or chiropractic stuff, that we should be able to produce peer-reviewed random controlled trials with, you know, and so forth. And there's a phrase that I really enjoy using called connect the dots. And I've done a lot of research myself. I'm a past president for the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health and was in somewhat of a position to help bring the whole concept of oral systemic health into vogue in professional circles between medicine and dentistry. And it was a similar thing there. You look at the preponderance of the base science to show some of the mechanisms of action of what redox signaling generically is about. And it's interesting that even lifestyle things, you know, that are out there, that herbs and vitamin D and nutrition and exercise and, you know, biophotonics and all of these things, they have an effect on the mitochondria to also improve the signaling and gene expression pathways. Nothing like what Maureen talked about earlier about when we're directly replenishing. But for those reasons, this is more about base science. It's about foundational science. And maybe I'll kick it back to you, Jim, because this was an important thing with regards to why this company chose to take this science in a networking arena and why we're not continuing with multiple millions of dollars of research where we would then have the ability to make the kind of claims that people are looking for us to talk about, which we can't. Jim, do you want to address that just a little bit?
Well, you know, when I looked into this, again, I had had my 10 back surgeries. I was addicted to 500 pain pills a month with 4 different prescriptions. And at 58 years old, frankly, my dear, I was scared to death of growing older. And when my best friend shared it with me and I saw what it did to his son, who got hit with a viral attack on a cruise ship, and his recovery, and I had my aha moment quickly through brain recovery, and I was able to get off all my meds within 3 months. But within a couple of days, I knew there was something unique about this. And then, as an ex-stockbroker, I immediately had to go study why would this man turn down a boatload of money to keep it away from pharmaceutical, but yet give it back to us. And if you put yourself in this man's shoes, he's the most sought after business mind on the planet. We're actually going to have his son on our show in 3 weeks. So we'll hear from him. But when you understand his line of thinking and why he had to bring it out through networking, and I love to ask the question, well, Dr. Kaufman, how would you have done this? Dr. Maureen, how would you have brought this out to the people? Because it had to be categorized as a dietary supplement. And like I said, it's made from salt water. How in the world do you take that to the medical community? Because they would have killed it and flushed it down the toilet. But because one man said no to all the money and he said yes to us, this is an amazing, unbelievable, once and a forever opportunity because he could not market it through the traditional route because it can't hurt anything. Now, Dr. Kaufman, can you talk to that real quick? Why can it be a drug? What is it about this LD50 stuff that causes it to where it couldn't have even been a drug?
Well, I want to comment on what Lee said and then what you said, and I'll get to that.
Okay,
So,
we got 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll talk fast. You guys have to listen to fast. You know, when I was first looking at this and I didn't know what it was, went to PubMed, started reading research pieces and started to understand, and then I put it together with the research that Asea had done at the time, which was athletic and so forth. I started to make that jump, whereas they weren't making the medical claims. What I'd say to you, Lee, is there is good medical research, but it's generically about redox cell signaling versus Asea the product. And just
Exactly.
what we're talking about here is Asea as the product. They will never do disease-oriented research because that leads us into the pathway of being a drug and we're off the market. So it makes it makes excellent sense. They're doing research that demonstrates what it is, how it works, all these amazing things like genetic expression and so forth and so on, cellular communication. So I would say there is, you know, good research. And I early on, and I, you know, occasionally still do when medical professionals say, well, I want to see double-blind placebo-controlled studies. I say, okay, knock your socks off, go to pubmed.gov, put in redox signaling and, you know, read articles. And then you have to make the jump, which I did, to go, okay, this is confirmed, bioagilitics and on, the early MRI studies, this is redox cell signaling molecules. So you have to put that together. As far as zero toxicity and LD50s and so forth, it is interesting that the company that MRI that had this before it became Asea, before Virtus and so forth bought it, was, you know, they were in that pipeline, and then Virtus and, you know, Samuelson and so forth were in the pipeline looking for an LD50. And, you know, the PDR or any, you know, source of information about drugs always lists an LD50, which is the lethal dose that kills 50% of the test animals. And whether it's aspirin or Benadryl or chemotherapeutic drugs, they all have an LD50. No surprise, chemotherapeutic drugs not quite kill you. They have a very low LD50 versus something like Benadryl, which, you know, not quite, but you'd almost have to choke on it to get toxic. They couldn't find an LD50 for this precursor to Asea, to these redox signaling molecules. The story I heard, and I believe this is accurate, is they took some rabbits and replaced 20% of their blood with this, you know, precursor redox cell signaling supplement, and the rabbits would just run around the cage more and feel better and so forth and so on. They could not get an LD50, which is a pretty profound thing to recognize, because you realize these are literally the most bioactive molecules in human existence. And they, you know, most things that are very bioactive have a very high toxicity to them. And there's zero toxicity. I mean, you could drink too much water and get water toxic. You could leach out your, you know, distort your chemistry and so forth. You can't do that with this. This is one of the safest products in existence. So yeah, that's a pretty profound thing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So again, how else would you have marketed this if it wasn't through network marketing? And I love asking that question to people. The only way to do this is through friendship marketing. There's no other logical way to do it. And when we finally figured it out pretty quickly, you know, I was a financial advisor, and I did not intentionally ever hurt anybody, but I could not cause the stock market to go up or down tomorrow. And when the market went down after you had invested $1 million and it went down 50% in the next 6 months, you're not real happy with me. But here, I could do no harm. Now, as a medical professional, is that somewhere in what you guys all stand for?
No, it's at the foundation of what we stand for. Primum non nocere means first, no harm. You know, it's an interesting thought I had. I know we're almost out of time.
We're good.
But you know, here, me and a lot of people had this horrible experiences with network marketing verse. Here comes Virtus, who is arguably one of the greatest business minds of our time, you know, whatever, however, you know, he knows his stuff, and particularly about distribution and, you know, marketing and so forth. And he really knows almost nothing about it. He's not network marketing averse, I don't think, but he's this brilliant business mind, and it's just exactly what you said, Jim. Okay, how do we get this to the world? And they say, oh, network marketing. And he goes, and he looks at it as this brilliant, brilliant business strategist and goes, this is it. I mean, you know, had he had background in network marketing, if he, you know, I think, you know, I hadn't thought about that before, but it's kind of an exciting thought.
That's why he could come into it cleanly.
Exactly.
You know, he wasn't bringing any baggage. He was saying, if we're going to do this, you know, he couldn't have been ignorant of the history. You know, I wouldn't judge that. But coming at it cleanly and saying, if we're going to do it this way, you know, we've got hundreds of millions of people whose literal lives will depend on the decisions we make here. We have to do this right, and we have to be right. We have to be the right people and attract the right people. So, you know, in Jim, in closing up here, you know, I think that would be the appeal to everybody on here is to just take some validation in the idea that we are in the right model. It wouldn't happen. You know, this would still be in research labs, and it wouldn't see the light of day for another decade, probably.
Well, you know, Lee, real quick, when I was a broker with Payne Weber a long time ago, people would always come in. That was back in the day when these, you know, Merrill Lynch and all these guys, these CEOs were making hundreds of millions of dollars in annual bonuses. And they would just come in really angry at Wall Street, angry at big corporations. So when I asked people, I said, now here, the most amazing side of the other coin, the second side of the coin, is that we now get a chance. Would you rather that income, because the money's going to go to someone, would you rather it go back to Big Papa? Would you rather it go to the big corporation and have all the corporate America gurus make all the money? Why not me? And where we were financially, this is the most amazing gift, beyond getting my life back, beyond having my mind back and not be on pain pills, which were killing me. But the other side of the coin, I didn't have a good I was a broker. I did estate planning, but I did not have the financial resources saved up for me. I was busy doing it for other people, but I didn't have time to do it for myself because of all the market gyrations. So here we've been able to create a residual, duplicatable check that is unbelievable. And that's the other side of what people have to be aware of, is the financial blessing as well as the health blessing. It's unbelievable.
I agree.
We spend a lot of time, at least on the Asea 5 forum, talking about medical validation and
Right.
hearing from great medical professionals like Dr. Kaufman. And it's so nice, it's refreshing, that we could build a network marketing company selling pet rocks if you made it sexy enough, and I don't know. But the whole point in being a little hyperbolic there is that's not this. We have something that is a near miracle drink, because it's replenishing the molecules that our body natively uses, which we run out of over time, to signal for reparative health processes, and therefore we can heal naturally. This is why every other product out there that makes these same claims works, except that we can do it on a much more foundational level. We're kind of undergirding. We do it all, not just skin and not just hair and not just eyes or joints or GI tract. This is any cell in the body works. And so you blend that with what you've been talking about, Jim and Aaron,
Yeah.
and Maureen, with the model that puts this in the hands of millions and millions of people, and that's where it wins.
Well, one last thing real quick. The other thing you better make sure of is that, and I saw a lot of great companies in my years as a broker, but one thing can change in the upper management, the ownership of the company, and it's gone. Now, that's why when you're going to pair yourself up with a technology like we have, you better look at the other side of the coin and make sure who's behind it. And again, we've got Tyler Norton coming on our show in 3 weeks. And I would highly recommend do not miss that opportunity, because you better understand that this company is that once in a forever opportunity with what we have in the ownership and the senior management. And Dr. Kaufman, you've been around, you've seen them. And so you can justify that, correct? You and Maureen?
Absolutely.
That's why I'm
not
part
like
of
anything else you'll ever see.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm talking to a buddy who's a network marketing professional. Been courting him for several years. He's been in 2 different companies, and they have wonderful products. Products that come to, cutting edge products often come through network marketing. But the problem is, I've seen this for my 35 years in medicine, is something comes out like Asea or, the Noni or whatever it is, that's really good. And then in a year or 2 years, it's on the shelves at Walmart and Costco and so forth. Nobody's going to have what we got. He's had really good products, but, they are not exclusive. They're not category creators like what we got. And they don't revolutionize people's life. Yeah, they tell stories about they lose weight and they have more energy, but, our stuff makes theirs work. These are foundational molecules. Everybody who's in network marketing should be using our product to make their stuff work better.
That's why this is sexy.
Well, and when you wear a shirt like Dr. Kaufman, man, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. It's Friday, man.
Amen. Well, guys, we've got to cut it loose. There is another show. As soon as we stop this, they're going to be coming right back on within 10 minutes. And actually, Dr. Hayes is going to be part of these amazing, is it 5 or 6 women that are the power team with a very successful Asea women. But in 10 minutes, this show is going to be right back on here on Discover Asea. And I highly recommend that you all come back on. It is going to be from Australia. So there will be some Trish Winkler. I know Dr. Hayes. And then multiple other, actually, Gina Moran is coming on with her gun. So we're going to go ahead and end this now. So Gina, you're going to have to get back in. We're going to shut off, and then you're going to come back. So
hi everybody for
hey,
the
Gina,
Asea 5.
welcome
Hey,
to the
Joey,
Asea 5.
man, how you doing?
Hey.
So guys,
I
we're going
missed
to
the
go on.
party. Shoot.
I know you're going to come right back in. So we got to end this so you guys can start yours. See you guys. Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Dr. Kaufman. We have Dr.
Bye.
Dick Walker and Nancy Walker next week.
Oh, fabulous.
And we have Dr. Michael the week after that.